In that environment, of course, you have a rise in violence. Honduras has become the most violent country, with 90 deaths per 100,000 persons per year. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. So you have this, what we call ungovernability. The government has taken over for their own interest. They say Honduras is open for business. You see that when you arrive at the airport. Honduras is open for business. It's wonderful. But I've met in line there. I've met in line there. Just as an anecdote, the other guy, I saw these Chinese businessmen. I asked them what they were coming to Honduras for, and they said they were coming to Honduras to sell corn, basically corn syrup products. I said, really? Oh yes, we bring the corn into China and we make it into corn syrup, and then we bring it back to all across the world. We're going to sell corn syrup here in Honduras. That's the nature of the economy today, right? It's about extraction. It's about moving things around. It's about it's globalized. That's what globalized economy is. It doesn't make any sense, really, when you think about it. But that's what we're at. What can we do about it? Just in a summary, because I want to open up for questions. We need to hold the government accountable. When we have a law on the books called the 2008 Reauthorization Anti-Trafficking Reauthorization Act of 2008. That law is a very good law. It was passed because of the scandals around human trafficking that were taking place. And it allows for children who arrive, who are the victims of human trafficking, children or anyone who's the victim of human trafficking, to seek asylum in the United States, and to be not to be held by ICE, by Homeland Security, but to be turned over to family services, the government, and treated with dignity and care while they make their asylum cases. That's the important law that basically Obama tried to trump and said, he was saying on the spot, and the right wing were attacking him, you're encouraging all these children to come. And so he said, we're going to expedite deportations. We're going to send a message to Central America that they shouldn't be coming. And part of that, I have to admit that part of that is true, because the Garifuna communities heard about people from San Pedro Sula, who were the children who were leaving for the United States, and heard that they could stay, that they were able to stay. They didn't know all the details, and then the traffickers, the coyotes, began telling them, look, I'll take groups of kids, I'll just bring you and turn you over to the, and all you have to say is you come from San Pedro Sula. So the Garifuna people went to San Pedro Sula and got on the bus, and went with the other children who themselves were from very violent communities, and they ended up at U.S. Customs, women with children. We have a Garifuna that we work with, have an international organizer in New York City by the name of Carla Garcia. She's a wonderful organizer. She's fighting for the rights of the immigrants. She has a difficult job. She doesn't want them to migrate to the United States. It's emptying the communities. It's destroying the possibility of cultural transmission of their culture. All the young people leaving, the young mothers. So she's trying to counsel them to return to Honduras. But at the same time, she's trying to defend their rights and their dignity. The mothers, even though they're not being, it's too expensive, evidently it was too difficult. They didn't have beds for all the people who were coming in detention. So they started a program, they have these ankle bracelets, electronic ankle bracelets, which are called, well, they have a worse name in Spanish, grilletes. And these are being placed on the ankles of the women. Without they go to a hearing and suddenly they're having this put on their ankle. And they have to have it on them, and they're told they can't leave New York City. And these anklets are usually only worn by hardened criminals. And so these women are seen with this ankle and they feel terrible shame. It's like an image of slavery. It's like a shackle. On the other hand, you don't want them to be detained either. So we're fighting for their dignity in any way we can. We need to change the push factors. We really need to look at the root causes, which are impoverishment. U.S. policy that systematically impoverishes the majority of the people in these countries for the benefit of a few capitalists who bring in sweatshops, a few people who want to control the land and sell products for cars and to run cars and machines rather than feeding people, that undermines the democratic process of those countries. And so that's the struggle. It's a struggle for democracy, and it's a struggle for the well-being of all. Right? It's a struggle for dignity. I'll end my talk there, and I'd love to have a dialogue about it and get into it a little more. We can talk about Guatemala a little bit, and El Salvador as well.
Would you come to St. Matthew Episcopal Church and give this same talk?
Absolutely, I'd be happy to.
I will see you afterwards.
Thank you.
Stephen, can you talk a little bit about why Nicaragua was not on the list?
Yeah, so there's been some analysis about this. Nicaragua, there's virtually no unaccompanied child or young parent trying to migrate from Nicaragua to the United States. From what I've heard from my friends who have been, the Sandinistas in power, they have brought some benefits. There's democratic process happening in Nicaragua. You have agrarian reform process. You have support for farmers. You have a lot of positive policies. The other thing is, I don't know, I've traveled to Central America for many years, starting in the 80s. Nicaragua was always the most mellow place. Of course, I was there. If you go to Tegucigalpa or San Salvador, Guatemala, you feel the vibe. I don't know, it's a violent vibe. It's a vibe of military. It's like a legacy of militarism, of severe repression. Guatemala is a place of great fear. El Salvador is a great place of great fear. And Tegucigalpa has become like that too. Fast food, U.S. fast food stores everywhere. You don't see quite that penetration of globalization into Nicaragua as you do in these other countries. And I think that's largely due to the social movements that brought about the Sandinista revolution in Nicaragua. You still have that strong resistance there.
The country Banana Republic doesn't have anything to do with it.
Yeah, there's a company called Banana Republic that's making. It's kind of like if people knew the history, they wouldn't name their company Banana Republic. But yeah, it's kind of a chic thing, right?
Yes. I would add to the Nicaragua piece, there was a great story on NPR about the fact that Nicaragua has instituted a very different kind of policing than you see in the other three countries that are sending lots of refugees northward. And it's a kind of policing in Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras that's highly militarized, whereas the policing that's going on in Nicaragua under the Sandinistas has been much more a community kind of policing where people know the neighborhoods well. It's a great story. You could go to their website and see it, but it's pardon? This was an NPR story probably in November, and pretty well done. And I think it's worth then putting this in that larger context of militarization within the whole region. And one thing that I think is important to see is when you look at Colombia and how our militarization of that situation has begun to dismantle some of the cartels in Colombia, what has happened as an unintended consequence of that militarization is that it has forced some of that drug trafficking into Central America. And so it's made that a much more violent region, partly because of our policy also in Colombia.
Yes, if you've been, especially on the coast of Honduras, and it's common knowledge that narco traffickers, for example, the land that the Garifino are recovering right there, it was invaded by a narco trafficker. They had to recover it from a narco trafficker with armed paramilitaries because it had a nice flat area for landing strip and it had access to the ocean, and it was a very remote, secluded place. It was perfect for drug transit point for drugs. And so this is really undermining the fabric of these countries. And I agree that in the last 10, 15 years, Central America has increased greatly the amount of drugs that are passing through there. And probably, as you say, because it's becoming more difficult to do in Colombia. Yeah, thank you.
The question I have is, for many years now, it seems that the drug violence that you have in the south of the border is dependent on the drug the insatiable appetite for, and that has, I don't feel that has been really explored. And it's like a dark secret, like a shadow. Maybe you could address that a little bit.
So Frank brought up the issue of the demand for drugs that drives the whole drug issue. It hasn't really been resolved, right? This remains the huge elephant, in the room behind the whole drug trafficking phenomenon, right? And the issue of punishment versus rehabilitation, right? So all those issues are part of this equation.
Do you know of any group or organization or agency in Kentucky or Indiana that is caring for unaccompanied minors?
Well, I think like in the public schools, a lot of children have turned up. A lot of new children have arrived in public Jefferson Community schools, and so the demand on the services has increased. For ESL, all those. What happens is a lot of these children are unaccompanied, but they have family members, and so they are sent to live with their families while they await their hearings. So our community, we have many. I saw a figure, there were a couple hundred at least unaccompanied children who are now here in Kentucky.
But with parents now,
With aunts, uncles, other relatives, maybe their parents. Some of them have come to rejoin with their parents. That's another that's another thing that they've discovered. A lot of these unaccompanied children are coming to reunite with their parents.
Just to respond to Jefferson County Public Schools, sometimes the educators don't even know that they are unaccompanied minors. And one other issue that I've seen is that even though they may be coming out, of Honduras and South Central America, you've got unaccompanied kids even coming from other nations to those regions and then to us in the U.S. So I've even seen individual kids coming from China and then coming through South America or Central America to us.
I think it's interesting that, in other words, the trafficking has become such a powerful tool for bringing people, right? That people from Asia are using Latin America as a way to get into the United States. It's logical, right? Because otherwise, you have to, come by boats and try to land in, California or something. It's much more difficult. But it's easier to get into Mexico or Central America and then use the coyote systems to come here. We have to say that 67,000 were detained, but many others reached the United States without being detained. Right? So the numbers are much higher in reality of who actually came. Right? Now some of them are just being delivered at the border, but others have more sophisticated coyotes who know how to get them to their final destination. It costs a lot of money. That's the system,
To what extent is WINSEC responsible for or has influenced the situation that's created this problem?
Yeah, WINSEC, the School of the Americas, and other training facilities of the U.S. military, I would say it plays a large role because to suppress democratic movements, you use force, right? And the militarization and the kind of counterinsurgency strategies, et cetera, that are being used, arguably a lot of that knowledge has come from the trainings in School of the Americas and other training facilities of that kind. We have schools in El Salvador now where police are being trained, the United States has financed. There's a number of training facilities, not just in Fort Benning, but this is kind of an integral part of the Pentagon's work, right?
I just want to add something that is quite interesting. I've been working with some of these families, and there has been cases where they try to go to court to get the custody of the child, and then they go to the immigration attorney, but it seems like in the process, they are being told immigration is going to be at their home, take the child out of the school. I mean, this is the people that's supposed to know what is going on, and they have the credentials and everything, but they are causing a lot of fear among those families because they are saying, take the child. Yesterday I had a child who has been out of school for a week because the attorney told her the child is going to be deported. Take it out. It's against the law. I mean, so they are facing other type of violence here with the people they're supposed to help them. They are professionals. So not everybody that has a credential of, say, I'm a lawyer, it's a good person or has a professional skills or compassion, say it that way.
Thank you, Connie. And with the new administrative decree of Obama concerning, people becoming legalized, or at least not getting out of their illegal situation, registering with the government, that's an issue that a lot of fake notary publics and others come to advise, and it's an important area of work advocating and providing the right advice and the right knowledge to people, right? Very important. So, if you'd like to hear some positive news, though, I think for me, I have a lot of hope because these social movements, for example, in Honduras, the social movements are powerful. They're the majority now. They don't have a president right now that they elected because of the fraudulent last election. Xiomara Castro, the wife of Mel Zelaya, who was deposed in the coup, actually should have won that election, but it was stolen through fraud. So, I mean, that shows that the consciousness of the average Honduran, and especially the Honduran who's part of an organization, has greatly changed. People understand totally. They say the blinds were taken off their eyes after the coup in 2009. So Honduras, there's a lot of hope for real positive change coming out of this. It's just a question, we have to watch what the U.S. is planning, what the U.S. government is now planning. On the one hand, opening up relations with Cuba, maybe soft power they call it. On the other hand, attacking Venezuela. So we have to watch and the U.S. government is culpable. We should continue to demand that the U.S. government stop supporting the Honduran regime, stop sending military and police support for them. But we had more than 100 congresspersons sign letters to that effect. The Honduras Solidarity Network that I'm part of is a very effective network and has been doing very good advocacy work and monitoring the situation and accompanying during the elections and telling the truth about what's been happening in Honduras. So if some of you would like to be more active, please let me know that there are working groups of the Honduras Solidarity Network that are active, having conference calls and moving forward the work. And if you're interested, also, we do periodically organize delegations to Honduras where we have incredible experiences where you think you're in another continent completely, in another hemisphere, in another zone, where you're in part of the ceremonial drumming that was actually very important in recovering the land in Vallecito. They had only the drums, and they drummed and drummed and drummed for 1 month straight until the narcos finally got spooked and they just went away. They're still coming back, but it's those drums, the power of the culture that's holding them together. It's very inspirational. Well, I guess we can close the talk there. Thank you very much. I have materials on food sovereignty. I have a flyer. I have a couple of handouts that I've made on this topic. One is a 2-pager and one is a longer 4-pager. I have a number of copies of them and the calendar outside. Let me know if you're interested in being part of this work or in supporting the work of agricultural missions or the local food justice work of Sustainable Agriculture of Louisville. Thank you very much for your attention.